Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Hello, Colorado. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com. We'll be starting here shortly. We got some really special guests tonight, so we decided to start the live stream a little early, let people have a chance to get into the live stream here on YouTube. Please join the chat. Uh, Follow on Twitter, Facebook, everything else. Like, share, subscribe. We'll be getting here started shortly. 7:30 is our normal time that we do everything. So just got the live stream going a little bit early, allow everybody to get in. But at 7:30, we're going to have the mayor of Monument and council member Steve King as well, Mayor Pro Tem, to talk about construction defects, this right to remedy bill. And then at 8 o'clock, we'll have Ian Escalante from Rocky Mountain Gun Owners talking about some bad gun bills going through the legislature this week. So we're about to get started here in just a couple minutes. So stay tuned. Colorado. Again, this is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com. We got Michael Vance, legislative director of the Libertarian Party of Colorado, also joining us here. We're going to have a really fun live stream tonight. We do this every week during the legislative session. So please join us here on YouTube. Going until May 8th when the legislative session ends here in Colorado. Unfortunately, we have some really bad authoritarian legislators here in the state government who are trying to take away our liberties, raise our taxes, infringe on our rights. So we do this every week to empower individuals, to empower the people of Colorado to have a better understanding of what's going on in our state legislature, understand what's going on in our state government, and really trying to empower you as an individual to have a voice in the legislative process. I wrote this guide. I'll make it really easy. It's at freestatecolorado.com/testify. Check that out if you're interested in speaking at the state capitol, if you want to have a voice, have some input in what's going on some of these bills that we talk about every week. freestatecolorado.com/testify. But really in-depth guide, basically giving you all the tools, all the information you need to make your voice heard down at the state capitol, real step by step. Of course, freestatecolorado.com, we have new interviews, articles, a lot of fun stuff coming out all the time. So check that out. Lots of good stuff. And we'll be getting started here with the Mayor Monument, as well as the Council Member Mayor Pro Tem, Steve King, as well here shortly. So give us just a couple minutes and we're going to get started. So just to give people some more information of how you can keep track of all the legislation that's going on down at the state capitol, check out LEG, that's leg.colorado.gov. This is your hub. This is the website for the General Assembly, our state legislature, where they go through and list all of the bill information. You can find your legislator there, find out who represents you in the state capitol, committee hearings, the schedule, everything. So it's really the best website to go to. What's really interesting too is if you click on the bills button here, and then it just brings up the three most accessed bills. So that's always interesting to check in it on every once in a while and see what bills people are looking at. Of course, some of the gun bills are some of the biggest ones out there, as well as the Tabor refund bill, which of course I'm sure people are interested in because they're getting their tax refunds back and they want to understand, the Tabor aspect of it and kind of how they're going to get their money back. So leg.colorado.gov, very important website to keep track of everything that's been going on. Some other recommendations, some other friends would be the Colorado Union of Taxpayers. The Colorado Union of Taxpayers rates nearly every piece of legislation. It talks about whether they support it, whether they oppose it, and give you a lot of information about why they do that. So definitely check that out at coloradotaxpayer.org, a really good group. Another great group is Liberty Scorecard Colorado. That's libertyscorecardco.us. They also track most of the legislation that goes through the state capitol every year and rate it. And not only that, but they rate the legislators as well. So you can see how your elected representative is rated based on the principles of individual rights, free markets, and limited government. So you can see some of these scores are pretty dismal. There's some good legislators down there. It's an easy way to tell is at Liberty Scorecard, libertyscorecardco.us, and take a look and see the ratings down there. Some are better than others, of course. As well as coloradotaxpayer.org. They do an award every year for the Taxpayer Guardian if they have one. But some great resources for you to check out. But tonight we're going to be talking about some bills specifically that are going to be heard this year. We'll add some links in the YouTube chat there as well. But there's the right to remedy construction defects. That's one of the big topics we're going to talk about tonight. Love to hear more about this. We have mayors joining us here, so we're really excited to see that. Mitch LaKind, the mayor of Monument, and we're going to have some interesting discussion about this bill, which will be heard this week on Tuesday. So, of course, a really important bill. Then at 8 o'clock, we're going to have uh, Ian Escalante join who to talk about a really bad gun bill going through the state capitol this year, the concealed carry permits and training, which is also being heard this week. And that's actually tomorrow on March 4th. But yeah, Michael, if you're on the call there, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brandon. How about yourself?
Hey, very well, thank you. So this is Michael Vance, the legislative director for the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Definitely doing a lot of good work down there. The Libertarian Party of Colorado is making a lot of strides, really having an impact in our state government. So kudos to everybody on the board for doing that. And
Thank you, Brandon.
yeah, and these calls are a piece of that, or a part of that, if, in my opinion. There,
Absolutely. This call is critical for the work that we're doing.
cool, cool. Looks like we're also going to have some other special guests here in the Zoom call. So we'll give some people an opportunity to talk and go over some of the bills of the week. So it's really exciting that we're able to get some elected officials, some elected representatives, some liberty activists from across Colorado to share their input and give us the information about what's going on. Perfect. And we're getting some really good feedback too. We're getting some really good views on all of these videos. Of course, you can go into the playlist on Free State Colorado YouTube channel and look at all the previous weeks. And we do a pretty in-depth job. We usually go through every single committee hearing of the week, talk about what bills are going to be discussed. This week, we're not really going to have time to go through every single committee hearing. We will highlight several of the big bad bills that are going on this week, in addition to the couple that we're going to be talking about with our special guest here. But perfect. How about Michael? I mean, if you're ready, we can kind of get nicely. We jump into it a couple minutes early here, if you're good with that, just to kind of get some of this stuff going.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to do today, so I'm happy to get started early.
Perfect, perfect. So we're gonna jump in here and look at some of the bills from last week. So this is the bills we talked about in depth, 2 hour live stream last week, going over a lot of these bills. So kind of giving people an update about what's been going on these bills. Senate Bill 132 did pass committee. That was allowing protections for evaluation of educators, so allowing teachers to hide their evaluation reports from the public. Bad bill did pass. The content of material in libraries, a little surprised that one was killed. It didn't make it, but that bill was going to create a statewide process in terms of what can be taken out of libraries, because there's this discussion about age appropriate material in Colorado's public libraries. So interesting to see that that one did not make it through. I think there was some outcry from the teachers, if I'm not mistaken there. Additionally, Senate Bill 5, prohibit landscaping practices for water conservation, did pass, was amended. House Bill 1134 also passed, adjustments to tax expenditures to reduce burden. 1169, repeal and divest from companies with Israel prohibitions law. That was Elizabeth Epps' signature legislation down there, where she had her Palestinian protesters down there at the committee hearing. That bill expectedly did not make it out of committee. House Bill 1147, candidate election deepfake disclosures, did pass, requiring disclosures if people use deepfake technology in their political ads. House Bill 1177, the county commissioner elections. A little surprised this one passed unamended. I thought there'd be some more pushback from the counties. Upset maybe that the state government is really trying to control how county elections operate and how counties are organized. So we'll see how that bill continues throughout the process here. House Bill 1150, false slates of electors passed. Not surprised on that one. House Bill 1283, Secretary of State review for municipal campaign finance complaints, that got delayed. So interesting to see, maybe there was some concerns from city clerks. House Bill 1279, that was Ken DeGraff's bill for vote tracking number elections, kind of trying to create more transparency in elections. That bill did die. So that was Monday. That was just Monday of last week. So there's a lot going on. As you can see, we're kind of in the big crunch time here for everything that goes on down at the Capitol this time of year. Tuesday of last week, let's see what happened with those bills. Senate Bill 11, the online facilitated misconduct and remote tracking bill, was laid over. That was the uh, online dating bill that did get delayed over. House Bill 1126, the substance use disorder treatment as a bond condition. That bill was killed. Not too surprising there. That was a Republican bill killed by the Democratic majority. We also had offenses related to operating a vehicle. That's the anti cell phone use while driving. Or no, that's the anti-commercial drivers bill that did get delayed. The accessory dwelling units bill, House Bill 1152, did pass. Not surprised there. Of course, with the housing issue in Colorado, these ADUs or accessory dwelling units are being looked at by a lot of people as maybe a potential solution. So not surprised that that bill passed. House Bill 1259, price gouging and rent declared disaster, passed. It was a bad bill, but it did pass. Not surprising there. Surprised actually as some of these got delayed. So it shows that there's maybe some more stakeholder issues, or maybe some of these newer legislators, need more time to get amendments to get these bills polished up. I would not be surprised that way. That's why we're seeing some of these delays. So nonprofit member data privacy and public agencies, that was delayed. That was a good bill. Senate Bill 129, a bipartisan bill to make it easier for nonprofits to resist the government trying to dig into their donors. So I'd like to see that one pass. The hair floral alkali and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals bill did get delayed again. It's been delayed multiple times. That bill would outlaw an entire class of chemicals used in a variety of products. So it seems to be a very bad bill. Interesting to see that that's not getting a lot of traction. Senate Bill 32, methods to increase the use of transit, did pass. Not surprising there. Of course, they're trying to push mass transit on everybody. And we're going to see some of that this year or this week when we're talking about some of these bills as well. And then real property valuation was killed, Senate Bill 144. Senate Bill 94 was also killed, was passed last week, the safe housing for residential tenants, putting new requirements on landlords and property owners. So we got about a minute before our guests are going to be jumping on here. So we'll go through Wednesday really quick. Senate Bill 157 did pass. It did get amended, but nonetheless, that was a really controversial bill, the Colorado Open Meetings Law for the General Assembly. Did pass out of committee, that first committee at least. A licensor of electricians, excuse me, that was a good bill, streamlining the licensing process for electricians. It did get delayed. Weapon possession for previous offender, adding crimes. That was another Republican tough on crime bill. We've seen several of those this year. Many of them have gotten killed by the Democratic majority, but that one did pass. The midwives bill delayed. I know there was some outcry over that bill from the midwiving community or people who use midwives. And then 1040, gender affirming healthcare provider study, was delayed. House Bill 1241, alignment of petty property crime threshold, passed. Kind of and a pro crime bill in some regards. And then the railroad safety requirements passed. Not surprised there. But it looks like we got our guests on here. So we're going to go ahead and shift over there, and we'll jump into our regularly scheduled program here shortly. For those of you just joining, this is a weekly video series, a weekly live stream we do from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Every Sunday during the legislative session. My name is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com. And so Michael Vance of the Libertarian Party of Colorado, the legislative director. And we have some great guests on here tonight. We have the mayor of Monument, Mitch LeKind, and Steve King, also a council member from Monument, here to talk to us about one of the bills going on in the legislature this year. So, Mayor LeKind, you gonna go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much for having both myself and Mayor Pro Tem Steve King. Um, uh, we're from Monument. I don't know where you guys are located, but we're very happy to be here. So definitely appreciate the invite.
Wonderful. And Mayor Pro Tem King, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Steve King. I'm the mayor pro tem of Monument, and I appreciate that you'll allow us on the show. This is uh, something that's near and dear to my heart, to try to remedy these construction defects and try to get some affordable housing for people. So that's where I'm coming from.
Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time this evening. So every week we look at almost every committee hearing that the legislature has over the week, go through pretty much every bill, and try and give people the opportunity to have exposure to what's going on in our state government, but also the opportunity to be empowered so that they can speak in support or in opposition to some of these bills. We're trying to make it a little bit more accessible for people across Colorado, from a pro-liberty perspective to get involved in our state government. So if you guys want to jump in and tell us about Senate Bill 106, it is being heard this week, so definitely a big priority for people out there. On Tuesday, March 5th, in the Local Government and Housing Committee, that's Senate Committee Room 352 at 2 p.m. this Tuesday, March 5th. So if you guys want to take over here and tell us about this bill.
Sure, I'll jump in. So my background is I used to build condos back in the 90s. And since the 90s, it has been essentially nothing has been built. And the reason it hasn't been built is because the insurance is impossible to get. Trial attorneys back in that day, they were going around to these condo projects and they were telling the HOA that they would investigate any construction defects at no charge to them. And then they would come up with a bunch of things and they would immediately file a lawsuit. And the lawsuit was intended to settle out of court, which they did, and essentially drove all of the insurance companies out of the state. So condos are the only true affordable housing that there is. It's in direct competition with apartments. And so if condos come online, then apartments have to compete with them. And so rents go down or sales prices go down. Something has to move in order for them to sell or rent those units. But there is no competition right now, and it's all in big investment firms. Most of them are Wall Street companies. The top 50 own about 3 million apartment units around the country. And they don't really care that much if they have a high vacancy rate, because what they're trying to do is keep the rents high so that they can keep the cap rates high on the buildings. It's been kind of a scam. It's been a scam for the consumer that has not been able to have a choice. And so without doing subsidies, this is really the only form of competition. So apartments and condos, they would both be built with the same building codes. So they have the same materials, they have the same labor, they have the same inspectors, and apartment developers are not getting sued. So that pretty much tells you where it's all at. So 106 has some remedies in it. They have the right to cure, which is a big bonus. And it takes a lot of the frivolous lawsuits out of it, because they can't just arbitrarily file lawsuits. They also need 2/3 majority of the actual homeowners. And what makes condos so ripe for litigation is because they used to just need the approval of the homeowners association, the board, because you don't own any property there. So you don't need to, like even in townhouses, they would need to get everybody to sign on board in order to do a class action lawsuit. But in condos, all they need is the HOA board to sign up as a majority to go ahead and do it. And they've done some mitigation on that in the last 10 or 15 years. So you see a few, but the ones you see are either really high end so that they can build it into the price, the cost of litigation, or there's 20 units here, 20 units there, and they're not worth going after a class action lawsuit. So I'm really in favor of this bill. I don't know if it goes far enough. We'll see, but we intend in Monument to try to have less apartments and more condos. And I think there's way too many apartments out there right now. They're overbuilding them, as builders typically do, and there will be a glut of them at some point in time. So we just need to help our first-time home buyers or people that want to scale back. We're going to end up losing our 20-somethings in this state if we can't give them some type of affordable housing. So that's my quick view on this. Even though it's not that quick.
Yeah. So let me first off, I want to add that the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which Monument's not a part of because we're not up in the Denver metro area. We did sign off on the letter with dozens of other mayors. I will be up in Denver on Tuesday in support of this bill. I don't know how many mayors are going, but as Steve alluded to, the 20 somethings that we're losing. And I don't know if we discussed in our legislative workshops that we host weekly with the city of Fountain, if the Home Builders Association is behind, stands behind this. I hope they do, but this has been a topic that they have been bringing up for quite some time, which is to address the missing middle. And this is probably as close as we're going to get, at least in its current form. And amendments may fly when this actually gets into committee. But to address those that can't afford a townhouse or a single family, this is the bottom rung, right? So I'm hoping the HBA is behind this. They've come to the town to discuss this particular missing middle category before, or attainable housing, however you want to, put words around it. But there's dozens and dozens and dozens of mayors that are signing off on the support of this bill. We know the trial attorneys are not in favor of it, but that's expected, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Perfect. So yeah, this bill is very interesting. I know the construction defect issue has been going on for many, many years down at the state capitol. It's been a big issue, and I really like the point that you both brought up that, condos, that these properties are really what give people a foot in the door in terms of property ownership and home ownership. It is definitely the time has never been more ripe for this kind of legislation, I believe, because uh, you know, housing is a big issue, right? The state government, legislators are coming up with everything they can to try and fix the housing issue and make it more affordable for people. And of course, this bill would definitely do that. So, looking at the bill a little bit, it seems like the fiscal note is always a great place to start for people because it gives you a little bit more cleared definition of it. So right now, current law allows construction professionals to settle construction defect claims by either paying an agreed upon sum or remedying the claim defect. The bill establishes the right to repair. So this is the change that would happen in state law if this bill passes. It establishes a right to remedy for construction professionals to remediate work on a construction defect claim. Completion of remedial work settles and releases a claim, and all future claims related to the construction defect are limited to the remedial work. So definitely makes it easier for these builders, these developers to know that they're not going to get sued or dragged into court for any defects in the construction. Also really interesting that this bill kind of disempowers homeowner associations a little bit. So the current law allows a construction defect action to be initiated by a majority vote of an HOA unit owners. This increases that simple majority to a 2/3 vote and requires an HOA to obtain written and signed consent from each unit owner. So definitely making it more difficult, increasing that threshold for lawsuits. I mean, this is definitely a good bill for the developers, for property, these property companies that are coming in to build these properties. What else do Coloradans need to know about this bill?
Well, I mean,
Go
there's
ahead.
one thing that seems to be missing, and Steve touched on it, and that's the insurance companies. I'm hoping that it's organic, that they come back, right? So if this bill passes, then the insurance companies should feel that they've got the state watching out for them, so they're not being sued in the way, or having to pay out lawsuits in the way that's been done in the past. I don't know what the state can do from a regulation standpoint to lure insurance companies back in. That will remain to be seen, because for some period of time we may not see an immediate um, action taken by developers to say, okay, now that this is in place, we can proceed with condominium projects. If insurance companies are still going to keep their rates up, or they're not going to come back to the market.
Yeah, and it's difficult for construction companies in general in Colorado because it's not very friendly towards insurance companies as far as construction goes. But in the short term, and I might regret saying this because I'm really like very limited government kind of guy, but maybe there needs to be some type of a panel from at the state level that would determine whether or not that it's truly a construction defect, and somehow be a mediator in that regard. Because again, all of these projects are the codes get more difficult every year. They build they build apartments with the same materials and the same labor, and they have the same inspectors and everything. So, and you just don't see apartment buildings slowing down because there's all these construction defect lawsuits. So, they're frivolous suits for the most part. And, somehow there needs to be a middleman that can determine whether or not truly is a defect, I think.
Yeah, the one thing I don't see in the fiscal note is, I mean, they're not appropriating anything. And with so many of the bills that come across that Steve and I review, one of the things we look at is whether it's a funded or unfunded mandate. And we also look to see if sometimes a bill should require a panel for study purposes, right? Not because we want there to be more. I'm very much pro limited government as well, but when you introduce something new like this, that's going to probably have a lot of egregious comments being made during testimony, especially from the trial attorneys. A panel to review and study the matter usually is something that would happen in the first year, especially if there was going to be any more funds coming from the general fund. But in this case, they're not studying anything. They're just slamming in the legislation, which who knows what's going to happen with that, right?
Yeah, very fair point. I'd love to get any opinions or any thoughts. We have some other people here on the Zoom call. We got Natalie Menton, a great liberty activist who's studied a lot of this legislation. Natalie, do you have any input on this bill?
No, I don't actually, because I haven't studied it closely. And right now I'm still on Judiciary Committee for Monday, which is totally different. Meaning I'm catching up for this meeting. But I've been listening, so that's an advantage. Thank you.
Great. What about Michael Vance, Legislative Director of the Libertarian Party? Any questions or thoughts on this bill?
Yes, I was kind of curious. Let's say they do find an initial issue. Contractor goes and fixes the initial issue that was discovered, but a few years down the road, that initial issue caused some additional cracking or some structural damage to a property down the road. Is that contractor still going to be held liable for the issue because they already cleared themselves legally because they fixed the initial problem the first time?
Well, there's a statute of limitations on structural defects anyway. So, I don't know if that would reset the clock if there was a structural issue and it got fixed and it created another problem, if it reset that clock or not. That part I don't know. Most everything has a 1-year builder warranty, and then I think it's 7 years for structural. Might be 6. I'm not entirely sure on that. But and then when all this came about originally, we figured that all these apartments that were going to get built, they were going to build these apartments, and 6 years later, when the structural warranties ran out, they were going to do all these condo conversions, but they never did. And it's a little bit expensive to do that, but rents have been so high, there's no reason for them to do that. We've got a construction project that's opening up here in Monument that's it's typical apartment units, and they go from 2,200 to 2,700. That's not affordable housing. My kids can't afford that. So, they've never made that. They've never done the condo conversion. So we just need to get condos. That's less apartments, more condos. That's what I'd like to see. Yeah, it builds wealth for these people. They need an opportunity to get their foot in the door. They do this. If housing prices go up 15% or 10% or 20% even, then they can build a little wealth and move on and get into a house. But when a house starts at 500,000, I mean, kids just can't do that.
Yeah, very fair point there. I guess playing, kind of a devil's advocate, I mean, if say somebody buys a property, they become a property owner, and then there is some sort of defect on it, shouldn't they be allowed to seek, maybe they don't want it, maybe the defect's so bad that, if it's going to be having to be repaired and it's going to take years to get repaired. I mean, there's that cost associated with that, right? To having to live there and have to go through this right to remedy process from the builder or the construction company. I mean, shouldn't individuals have the ability to cash out at that point and say, hey, listen, this property I bought has tons of defects. Let's settle this, give me some money, and you can take your property back and we can move on. I mean, playing devil's advocate, what's wrong with that?
Well, there isn't anything wrong with that in theory. But how often does something like that truly happen? And if that is something that's happening, maybe the building inspectors need to be trained better. Maybe the engineers have to have some higher standards. And I think for the most part, the structural engineers are over engineering most everything right now because they're so leery of lawsuits. They over dig these foundations and haul in structural fill where there's any kind of expansive soil problems. I don't know how often that is truly happening. It doesn't seem like it's very likely. But again, maybe the building inspectors need to do better inspections.
I have
I can tell you from experience where I live in Monument, I've had several neighbors, and I'm knocking on wood here because still after 5 years, it's not happened to me, but several neighbors have had soil compaction issues to the point where plumbing broke beneath the soil and caused flooding into their window wells, and flooded their basement because there's only so much pressure the window well the windows can support. Others, well, probably a half a dozen people around me have had to mud jack the concrete that surrounds their house, whether it be the front yard or the backyard. And that's just shoddy workmanship, right? That's somebody who half-assed their way into soil compaction requirements. In fact, we watched a house get built, and I couldn't see the front of it because I can only see the back, but that person's front steps fell off. I mean, it's a concrete pour up the sidewalk from the driveway, and the front steps literally fell off the patio pour. And I don't know how you inspect that. I'm an IT guy myself, so I don't pretend to know anything that Steve does. But to the point of building inspectors, the entire Pikes Peak region has one building department, Pikes Peak Regional Building. So we don't have a building department within the town of Monument, as neither of the other municipalities do. And so if they're failing to inspect properly, and you have these defects in the condominiums, the developer should be, and the homeowner should have the right to seek redress, but not to the point where everything is a class action and you've got the entire complex is suing these developers out of business. Otherwise, we're not going to get more homes. I read today that the U.S. as a whole has a 7 million, the number was 7 million shortage of housing units, and that's inclusive of apartments all the way up to single family. The governor has spoken multiple times about what shortage we have in the state. And if we continue to make it impractical financially for the developers to build, and I'm not trying to say they need to become billionaires, but between them and the insurance companies, if they're leaving, we're never going to get the houses they want, and they certainly aren't going to be affordable.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. We do have a litigation happy society. The laws have definitely been skewed in a way that makes it easier for lawsuits, and lawsuits seem to be the go-to for a lot of reasons. Uh, any other input from anybody here on the panel? No, perfect. Well, definitely would encourage people then to show up and speak in support of this bill. If this is something you agree with, it seems like it would be a good bill to increase housing options to allow people to have more options for condos and the like without having, government mandated high density housing. Like, because that's one of the options. I bring that up, of course, because that's one of the options they're really pushing in the state legislature. So this bill will be heard Tuesday, March 5th. Expect a lot of local government support in this local government committee. So Tuesday at 2 p.m., individuals should reach out to committee members in the local government housing committee. Of course, reach out to your elected representative, your state senator, state house member, and urge them to support this bill if you think that's the way to go. And it seems like it for many reasons. So perfect. Any other comments there from the monument?
Well, no, I agree with the premise of reaching out to your representatives. I know that our House District 20 representative, former Monument Mayor Don Wilson, is one of the sponsors. They really need to know what everybody's thinking. I mean, Steve and I, we meet once a week with a lobbyist that Fountain and Monument pay for. They go and review things that will impact municipalities, specifically things related to home rule and whether the state's trying to take it from us or not. But if you're a citizen and not an elected official, you need to let your representatives know. And if your representative's not a sponsor, that's okay. Still let them know, but let the sponsors know that you're either pro or against a bill too, because if they don't hear from us, they're never going to know what the pulse of the community or at large the state is thinking.
Right.
Definitely very
And
fair.
agree. We will be testifying on this and other bills as well. Usually we wait 12 hours to give a 3-minute speech, but you just have to do it. And whatever's near and dear to your heart, you have to be proactive, because otherwise they're just going to run us over. They're running us over anyway. So we just have to push back as hard as we can.
Yeah, I mean, you have a 8 o'clock with RMGO, right? That's one of those things they're going to be running us over on, and that run over, that steamroller that they're going to put on us, without getting into the details of the next segment. But these are the kind of things that are going to cost the taxpayer money because the state's going to use that money to defend itself in court when the lawsuits come. And it's exactly the reason why citizens need to reach out and speak up to their representatives.
100%. Very well said. Definitely individuals across Colorado need to know who their state representatives are, who's representing them in their neighborhood in the government. Have that conversation with them, build that relationship, and keep an eye the best as you can. It's not easy. There's so many bills going through the legislature that it's nearly impossible to track them all. But that's part of the reason we do these calls, is to alert people to some of these bigger ones. And hey, here's a solution to the housing issue. So definitely seems to me, in my opinion, a good bill to support there. So perfect. We really appreciate you, Mayor LeKind and Mayor Pro Tem King, for joining us this evening. Please keep us up to date. Happy to, you have a standing invitation anytime there's any other legislation coming through that people need to be aware of. Please join and let us know. Any other questions or comments for the mayor and the mayor pro tem before we move on here?
No, I just want to thank you for allowing us to come on here and like to hang out and see what Rocky Mountain has to say.
Thanks for the update.
I have to go, but yeah, thank you very much for allowing us on. Definitely would love to come back and talk about the legislative issues, especially those that are infringing on our liberties. I'd like to think of myself as a leaning libertarian from the Republican side.
Right. We're both kind of in that camp, by the way.
What's that?
we're both in that camp.
Yeah. So,
Love to hear it.
but thank you very much for bringing us on. We look forward to seeing you guys again, and keep up the good work. Appreciate you getting the word out about these things.
Wonderful. Appreciate it. We do have another mayor who just joined the call here, Mayor Aaron Lamb of Keensburg. Mayor Lamb, anything you want to chime in here before Mayor LaKind jumps off?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Mayor LaKind and Steve King for joining tonight. And I was listening on YouTube before I was able to hop on here. Really great discussion, and I hope this bill passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Really appreciate the contribution.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, join anytime. And yeah, Mayor Pro Tem King, love to have you on the rest of the call and see what we go through. Please hang out as long as you can.
Sure, I will. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, that's one of the bigger bills of the week for sure. We're going to jump back into our regularly scheduled program. We got Ian Escalante from Rocky Mountain Gun Owners joining us here at 8 o'clock. So as every week, we look back at the past week of the bills that we've gone through. So we hit Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for the bills of last week that we talked about. Last week, Thursday, some other bills that we discussed at great length. A little surprised to see, I guess maybe I don't know if I'm surprised on Senate Bill 102, the taxation of premium cigars. That was Senator Sullivan's bill to possibly carve out, some sort of tax exception for his friends in the cigar industry. As far as I know, I really don't know the logic behind that bill, but interesting to see that it was killed by his fellow Democrats. House Bill 1125 did pass the tax credit commercial building conversion. So that's another solution that the government's looking for housing, is providing a tax credit for commercial building owners to convert it into residential housing. Not shocked that passed. Was very disappointed to see that Senate Bill 96 failed. That was to limit fenced perimeter security alarm system regulations. That was from Senator Van Winkle, one of our Liberty leaders down there. A good bill to make it easier for people to have home security systems. I mean, more important than ever, it seems, but unfortunately that bill was killed last week. The medical aid in dying, relatively controversial bill, probably an issue that's less controversial than it used to be, but Senate Bill 68 allowing out-of-state residents, out-of-state people, out-of-staters, non-Coloradans to come to Colorado and get assisted suicide. Very controversial bill that way. That did pass, not shocked at that. House Bill 1121 also passed the consumer right to repair digital electronic equipment. Interesting bill. Definitely some disagreements on that one from a liberty perspective, but interesting bill nonetheless. And then the Institute Charter Schools and Bond Indebtedness, was happy to see that passed. Allowing charter schools more funding options is definitely a good thing. Some of these government schools have just been failing to provide a good learning environment for the students. So allowing more choice, more options through charter schools. So great to see that bill passed. I'm really hopeful that Colorado's kind of, among the Democratic majority are accepting the idea, starting to accept the idea that school choice is a good thing. Hopefully those unions are losing some of that power. And I like to see that this House Bill 1154 is kind of a step in that right direction. So perfect. That's what we saw last week. This week we'll have a little bit of abbreviated since we have some great guests on board, but here's kind of the bills that we've been tracking for this coming week. So we can definitely start going through some of those if you'd like. What do you think, Michael?
I think there's a lot of interesting bills. One thing that sticks out to me is seeing the Cora Act in the Kill Committee, as it's called. I'm really happy to see that because we need to. I mean, we still need to our legislators let them know we need as much transparency as possible through all levels of our state government, including our municipalities. It's important. I mean, especially as somebody who lives in Jeffco, I want to know what's going on as much as I possibly can. So I'm hoping this one gets killed, but we still need to talk to our legislators and let them know, hey, this is something that we can't let go forward.
Yeah, and I would caution your optimism on that because even though the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs is the Kill Committee, there would still probably be the appropriate committee for this bill to be assigned to because it has to do with state core requests and state law in regard to that. So unless, maybe Natalie has a different perspective on that, I would not be shocked to see that this bill passes or that this bill gets amended and possibly passes. But I know, let's go ahead and click into that bill. Like you said, it's a bad bill. Definitely needs to fail. I know Natalie's been really keeping track on that, so I'd love to get her input. Natalie, if you want to chime in on this one.
Sure, I'll start screaming about this one. Yeah, not happy,
Please.
not happy at all about this bill. And so just going through the bullet points. First, I want to start with who is supporting this bill. So I went and looked at the Secretary of State's website and looked up the lobbyists that are taking a full support position on this and compared to who's opposed. And I just think it's a little bit useful. So as I go into it with supporting, we've got Adams County Regional Economic. Let me make sure I'm on the right one. Oh, no, sorry, back one. No, sorry, I took it down because I did another search in the meantime. So I'll just jump to the bill. Sorry about that. As I'm pulling it up, some of these main issues here. First, we've got the extension where right now it's 3 days for a custodian, record custodian, to respond to a request. Hopefully falls within the 1 hour that's free. But if they can also turn around and just tell you, well, it's going to be X amount of dollars, and then extend it from there to actually get the records to you once you've paid. It takes that 3 days, moves down to 2. Well, that would be suitable, but I would trade this whole bill for not having to deal with that minor issue of 2 or 3 day. Because what this bill is doing is saying, one, the record custodian can determine, identify a vexatious requester. And what includes a vexatious requester is somebody who maybe the factors may include how many number of requests a person has filed, the total number of pending requests, the scope of the request, the nature, content, language, and subject matter of the request, and any other oral or written communications with the custodian. And then they say, because the custodian determines what you're asking for is intended to harass. So basically, if you're doing any investigative type of work on a government and you are not a media outlet because there's a carve out for them, you could easily be considered a vexatious requester. And including with that, it will combine requests if made within 14 days. Now, going back to vexatious, what does that mean? Well, it means instead of the 3 days or 2 days I talked about at the beginning, that means the record custodian has 30 days to respond to you. And if you don't like being labeled a vexatious requester, well, too bad for you. You go to district court and you can file there. Well, as far as I know, right there, you're looking at, if you did it on your own, like, I don't know, a couple $100, but who's going to probably do that on their own? So they're going to have an attorney. The attorney's going to cost them $400 an hour or $300 or whatever it may be. And there's other problems with this bill. So I am 50-50 on whether this goes through. There's a couple other things within this one. Another is, in the past, I have requested government employee salaries. I get their first and their last name. They're a public employee. Newspapers used to do this in the past, actually. And request their date of hire, their salary. Like I just did one where I was getting their bonuses. And it's public information. This is saying that if you invade another individual's personal privacy, meaning some public employee tied in with this, potentially a NGO, that they can withhold it for that. So this thing is so widespread bad. And it's to me a 50-50. So there I went off on my rant about this one.
So definitely appreciate that.
Natalie,
go
I
ahead,
got a
Michael.
question.
Sorry.
Okay, so let's say worst case scenario, this thing not only goes through committee, but this thing passes and this becomes law. What would our options be at that point? Would we have a case that this violates our First Amendment rights as from a freedom of press standpoint?
I think from my point of view, there is some, as I was, and I should look it up real quick, the lobbyists who are opposing this include some people, some organizations that are longtime civil rights groups. And I think they would go after this. And I'm sure Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition would be happy to, and Zandsberg. So for anybody who's, not familiar with Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, they would be on. Colorado broadcasters would be on this, because I think they recognize in their day and age where the media is spread so thin, that they are really dependent a lot on citizen journalists to be able to cover so much ground with a limited amount of employees that they've got, that with this bill having the carve out for the media outlets, that they recognize for the bigger picture, that they need to protect citizens here too. So let's go this way. To answer your question, because many people don't know about this, the bill itself does not include a safety clause, also preventing a petition against this action to reverse it. Now, that's a lot of energy to do that. But on the other hand, what created our sunshine laws, which includes the open meetings laws, the public records, all of that was a citizen initiated measure that passed by 60% of the voters. So obviously citizens, they're not going to be pleased about this, but would there be a big effort? It'd probably be a legal challenge. And I don't know with courts, I don't know where that would end up.
Makes sense.
But the ramifications are really big, because we're not only talking about state government here, we're talking about local government.
I have the list of people who are opposing this bill. Do you want me to read them?
Yes.
Larry Hudson from Colorado Broadcasters Association.
Keep going. Go ahead.
Elena Belknap, Colorado Common Cause, excuse me. You've got Hillary Jorgensen of Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, as well as Andrew Christopher Montoya from the same group. Then you've got Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, Jeff Roberts. Let's see here. Next one, you're going to have August Policy Strategies, Colorado Press Association, and that's about it. Everybody else is either supporting or monitoring or amending.
So now go to supporting. If you don't mind, that's a short list.
It's a pretty big list of people supporting.
Was it?
Let's see here, actually. Let me flip that again.
I'll do those ones. So we got Auraria Higher Education Center. Yeah. So the education doesn't want these. City of Fort Collins, which shocks me because Paulus is up there. Oh wait, no, he isn't. He's in the county. Sorry. City of Fountain. Here's our public money, especially Colorado Association. Well, the school boards, but more importantly, Colorado Municipal League, the town of Monument. So we have a monument counselor, I think, on the call. I've been a former elected official, and when I was on RTD, I was happy to get rid of the fees for electronic copies, which was, as they quoted, a measly 25 cents a page. But we were talking about so anyway, I'm big on. So I recognize some governments think that this is a public information request can be take time, but it is so fundamental. I don't understand the support for this bill.
The speaker, the individual from the monument is William Douglas Much.
The lobbyist.
The lobbyist, correct? Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on this one, but I have a mixed bag. It very well is going to be amended, and it sure would be nice, wouldn't it, if we had like amendments 24 hours in advance so people could consider those before they testify. But we don't know what amendments they might pop out.
Yeah, definitely a very bad bill. I mean, it's just another example of the government trying to protect themselves from the public, right? These governments supposed to be the servants of the people. supposed to be representing the people. And of course, how can the people make accurate decisions in our democracy that most of these legislators proclaim to love so much if the people don't have all the information, right? An open government, an open society. I mean, knowing what the politicians are doing, knowing what the government is doing is a necessity for any type of democratic system. How can you have a rule by the people if the people are kept in the dark? So many reasons why that this is such a bad bill. Of course, an attack on our ability for individuals to know what's going on in government from that fundamental purpose. Green Leap Forward in the chat says that government bureaucrats are public servants. If they don't want this information disclosed, they can choose another job. And also, the whole media carve out thing is a joke. The average citizen is orders of magnitude a better journalist than these propagandists seeking protection. So thanks for that comment there, Green Leap Forward. Forest Mommy in the comments on YouTube says this doesn't make them sound suspicious at all, wanting to shut people down from records. Definitely not a way to increase trust in government, which I think when I interviewed Jeff Roberts of Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition last year, and that was one of the big talks, or big conversation pieces was restoring trust in government. People nowadays do not trust the government. They do not trust the political class for good reason, of course, but trying to hide things from the people and go against our Colorado Open Records Act is definitely a step in the wrong direction. So if there's no other comments on this,
I do.
Natalie, anything else?
Yeah, I do. So just for those who aren't familiar, because I don't do Coras that often, right now you get the first hour free. But if it goes beyond that, you're paying up to, and the org gets to choose that, up to, but most charge as much as they can, $33.58 per hour. And that adds up. And that's the deal of the day today. Come July 1, the state, because of the way the bill was written a few years ago, increases that by inflation. And just today, as a matter of fact, I was trying to figure out what number they're going to kind of hone in on, because I don't think they use, I think they use that number in like the March forecast, but it could potentially be up to, I think, I don't know, like 35 maybe, but up as high as $40 per hour to get this public information. So it's not like when they say vexatious requesters, it's not like, chorus can get expensive and you end up paying for it. And when we've got so many public information officers employed, look at some counties, there's 6, 7 of them on staff, and they're charging us. Okay, I'll stop. But we don't have the best open records laws. And, we'll talk about the other one, the one that you passed or you went through because it passed, but the one that's going to redefine what public meetings are. All right, I'll let it go. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
We'll definitely appreciate any other comments on this bill, specifically 1296. We do have Ian Escalante from Rocky Mountain Gun Owners. I'll turn the floor over to him. But any other conversation on this bill before we move on?
It's just wild what they're trying to do here in Colorado these days, especially when it comes to open meetings, laws, Cora. It's just wild how much the government is trying to hide from the public. It's kind of shocking, to be honest, but at the same time, you kind of have to expect it.
Yeah, very true. And so people, Monday, that's tomorrow, March 4th, 2024, March 4th, 1:30 p.m. in the Old State Library. So it's in the state capitol. This is the first bill to be heard in the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. If you can reach out to members of that committee and tell them to oppose this bill, reach out to your own elected senator and representative and let them know that this is a bad bill, and show up and testify in person if you can. So very bad bill. Let's hope it gets modified to the point of being okay or passable, or hope it just gets shut down entirely, right?
And I'll be there.
Perfect. Look for Natalie, one of our great liberty activists here in Colorado. Perfect. Awesome. Well, wonderful. Appreciate that. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn the floor over here to Ian Escalante. So Ian, what do we got going on this week from a gun rights perspective?
How's it going, everybody? Just got back in from Holyoke from the C4 forum out there. So it's been a long day, and it's going to be a very long couple weeks here on the gun issue. First off, talked about this bill a couple weeks ago. This is an expansion of the requirements for obtaining a concealed handgun permit. It is going to include a live fire, a written exam, and the real big thing that's going to be interesting is that I've heard from some Capitol insiders that we are going to see some amendments to this bill tomorrow. So currently, as the bill is written, everything is going to be turned over to CBI. CBI is going to run everything, going to control everything, and they are going to pretty much set the certification for instructors, the curriculum, the exam, all of it. Allegedly, what I'm hearing is some of the Republican representatives somehow got Monica Duran to come to the table, and we are likely to see a couple amendments tomorrow that are going to completely strike CBI from the bill. So it's going to turn all of this over to the county sheriffs, and CBI will no longer be involved in this bill. I've seen the amendments. I've read over the amendments. Quite frankly, this is still a bad bill, but this would be a marked improvement should those amendments pass. With that being said, this bill still needs to be opposed in every way possible. I mean, it's very simple. It's very straightforward. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There should be no permit needed to exercise a God-given right. The same way you shouldn't need a permit to speak freely or assemble or anything like that. You should not need a permit to carry a firearm to defend yourself or to defend your loved one. So that's the big thing that's going to be coming tomorrow. That hearing is going to be at 1:30 before the House Finance Committee. So, excuse me, a lot of things going on tomorrow. A lot of things, honestly, over the next couple weeks. Brandon, I'd be happy to come back next week. Next week's going to be a real big week for gun bills. We're going to see the school resource officer disarmament as well as the sensitive places bill. But for those of you who were on here a couple weeks ago, you already got a pretty good idea of what this does. It is going to make significantly harder for individuals to obtain a concealed carry permit, especially if the bill stays as written. Now, if these amendments that I'm being told are going to be ran or pass, it's going to make it a little bit better. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be making it harder and more difficult to obtain a concealed handgun license.
Yeah, definitely a bad bill, definitely an infringement on our right to keep and bear arms. Second Amendment rights are Colorado constitutional rights. Really, really bad bill. Everybody needs to reach out to their elected representatives or senators, show up and testify in person. We need a good showing against this bill that's going to disarm law-abiding people, giving criminals more opportunity to harm the public, to hurt people. Because the criminals, criminals already set out to rob someplace or hurt somebody. Because they don't have a concealed carry permit isn't going to stop them, right? I mean, you're only infringing on the rights of people who want to obey the law, want to do the right thing. So that's your good guy with a gun being disempowered in Colorado under this legislation.
Absolutely. And I hate to say this, my apologies for those watching. I just got over a cold, so if I cough or sneeze or anything like that, that is why. Another thing, too, that I hate to say this, but this is probably one of the least bad bills on the gun issue that's being pushed through this session. We actually had a bill, which I'll talk about more at a later date, that's going to create a whole statewide permitting system for all the gun shops. So all the gun shops now are going to have to get a state permit in order to operate. That's going to come with extreme regulation. On top of that, it's also going to give the state authority to do random warrantless searches of these gun shops. Refusal of a search will lead to being reported to the ATF and getting your state permit revoked. And also, all the gun shops will be required to fingerprint their employees, send their fingerprints to the FBI for them to go under a FBI fingerprinted background check. And on top of that, probably the craziest thing is that all firearms are going to be required to be safely stored inside of the gun shop, which means that rifles, if you go down to your local gun shop, rifles will not be able to be up on display anymore. They'll have to be either put in a display case with a trigger lock or stuck in a safe.
Wow. I mean, absolutely horrible. Absolutely, I'd say shocking, but obviously not entirely shocking, seeing everything that's going on. But I just wanted to bring up the list of the committee members. So, I mean, these are the people who are going to be voting on this bill. In particular, we have somebody like Bob Marshall, who is one of the biggest targets for flipping that seat in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see how he votes, as well as everybody else in this committee. I mean, people need to pay attention to these committee members and how they vote on this bill, and hold them accountable, if at all possible, during the election cycle, to if they vote in favor of infringing further on our rights to keep and bear arms. What do you think on this,
Absolutely.
Michael?
And we have, individuals like Mark Snyder who are running for higher office, and he's a sponsor on this bill. So it's very important, if you live in Senate District 12 or down in the Colorado Springs area, that we send a very clear message to Mark Snyder and we end his political career this year.
100%. Any other thoughts on this particular bill from anybody here in the
No,
panel?
thank you very much for having me on, and I'm going to try to get over this cold and get back in the saddle.
Perfect. So, Ian, this is the only anti-gun bill of the week, from what I could tell.
That is correct. We have two coming up next week, though. So I'm look forward to coming back and explaining to you the two really, really bad bills that are going to be heard next week.
Yep.
Well, really appreciate it. Yeah, and everybody, you need to get in contact with your state representative, your state senator, let them know you're watching their vote on this and other types of legislation like this, and do everything we can to push back against these people who want to disarm the law-abiding people of Colorado. So perfect. Really appreciate you, Ian. Get well, and appreciate that. Any other discussion on this bill from anybody before we move on back to our regular programming there?
Not at this time. This is just a terrible bill. And it's sad that this is the best bill out of all of them.
Yeah, least bad out of a really, really bad legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the pattern, right? I mean, Ian alluded to it. They want to do everything they can to make it impossible for law-abiding individuals to own guns. I mean, it's a package of bills. So it's part of this larger pattern, right? It's not about safety. It's not about trying to try and make society better. It's about trying to take gun ownership away from the people of Colorado. That's really ultimately what this agenda is about. I mean, there's no excuse for this type of legislation. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. If you're not a member of RMGO, definitely encourage people to go to rmgo.org, become a member, and stand up for our right to keep and bear arms. They're a great organization showing up at the Capitol in defense of our right and our rights. So perfect. We'll go ahead and jump back into this. Sound good, Michael?
Sounds great to me.
Perfect. So we talked about two bills being heard this Monday. The bill on restricting our ability to carry firearms to get a concealed carry permit, and then modifications to the Colorado Open Records Act, two very bad bills, both being heard on Monday. Tuesday, another part of that housing package bill. Thought this was the most interesting bills of the day on Tuesday. This minimum parking requirements. So, of course, we've been seeing a push to create high density housing in Colorado in these suburban communities that do not want it. It's been going on for years, of course, but this is just the latest iteration. So, House Bill 1304 being heard on Tuesday prohibits a county or municipality on or after January 1st, 2025, from enforcing minimum parking requirements for real property that is within a metropolitan planning organization. So there you go. So basically, a lot of times people build these apartment complexes, they build these condo facilities, and the municipality says, hey, you have to have enough parking because we don't want people clogging up the streets. We don't want people overflowing into other parts of the town, because that's what happens, right? If they build an apartment complex with not enough parking, I mean, you see it everywhere you go in Colorado. It's on the road. People are parking on the roads. They're parking in parking lots left and right. So this bill, of course, is the state, these legislators trying to use the power of the state government to enforce this agenda on our local municipalities, trying to centralize power in that way. Any thoughts on this bill from anybody on the panel?
I strongly oppose this bill. I think it's terrible. I mean, again, like I mentioned almost every single time, you can learn a lot and get a good insight just by seeing who is the sponsors. And these are some of the worst that are in the House for sure, in the legislature.
Yes, we have some of the worst authoritarians down there. You know, Stephanie Vigil, also a prime target for this election cycle. Stephen Woodrow, who is just total authoritarian, believes that the politicians and bureaucrats should control every aspect of our society. Thankfully, Kevin Priola will be out after this legislative cycle here, and then Nick Henrichsen, another authoritarian person there. So love to get any thoughts. Natalie, you're a big expert on the housing issues. Anything you can add on this bill?
Uh, just that I would oppose. That's one of the issues that'll continue to grow and grow, and people expect people to jump on RTD, and that's not the case. So no, I do not. I have problems with this.
Yeah, I mean, perfect. No, I completely see your point there. They're trying to force high density housing. They're trying to force mass transit on people. But guess what? The people aren't going to do it, right? I mean, we know what people in our communities are like, people in Colorado. What you're going to see if this goes through and there's not enough parking, I mean, it's just going to overflow into streets. It's going to overflow all across the metro area and the suburban area. People are not necessarily going to change their habits easily just because the state government, mandates that, allows these apartment complexes to build twice as many apartments with half as much parking. It's going to create problems. It's going to create more congestion. It's going to disincentivize, these people from having appropriate parking spots. So,
Yeah, and
any other thoughts? Or yeah, go ahead.
If the bill goes through, where the one that'll withhold your highway funding, your CDOT roads, major roads, if you don't build have the higher density within half mile of those certain transit corridors, which could include a bus route that's frequent, and then the density's there, then they don't have the parking. Basically, people don't necessarily give up the cars as we described. They filter into the regular surrounding neighborhood. Those are the kind of things that actually drive people a little bit crazy. So, government's unintended or intended consequences. That's all. I'm done.
Yeah, we got a great comment here from Green Leap Forward, who says it's been a complete and utter disaster in California where they combine this scheme with road diets, which often remove street parking and increase congestion on streets. MH08 in the chat on YouTube says, my old job was a 15-minute drive, a 45-minute bus ride, and an hour 5 on rail. I've definitely experienced that before, where you're trying to, hey, I'm going to take the light rail, ends up taking, an hour when it would take you 20 minutes to drive there,
And by the
another
way,
scheme.
if anybody is interested in and they're liberty minded, running as RTD director, that is on this year's ballot, just as a side note.
Nice, good point. Yeah, a good office to run for. It'd be great to have a bunch of liberty-minded individuals serving an RTD. That would be fun to see. So this bill will be heard Tuesday in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee in the Old State Library. So that's Tuesday, March 5th at 1:30 p.m. Show up, speak out, let your elected representative know what you think about this type of legislation. So perfect. We'll move on. Besides the construction defect housing bill, that's what I had for Tuesday. We'll jump into Wednesday here. Of course, Michael, anybody else here on the call on the Zoom chat, feel free to interrupt me if I skip over something you'd like to talk about. Wednesday, House Bill 1313, Housing in Transit-Oriented Communities. So, of course, very similar type of legislation here in as much as that has to do with housing, has to do with transit. We're seeing the bigger picture of the agenda, of course. So, House Bill 1313, concerning measures to increase the affordability of housing in transit-oriented communities. So here you go, just get rid of your car. You don't need a parking spot. And then let's go ahead and put high-density housing along these corridors, right? So here's your 15-minute cities for people who have been talking about that for a while. Section 1 of the bill establishes a category of local government. So they're creating a new category called a transit-oriented community. As defined in the bill, a transit-oriented community is either a local government that is entirely within a metropolitan planning organization, has a population of 4,000 or more, and contains at least 75 acres of certain transit-related areas, or if the local government is a county, contains either part of a transit station area that is both in an unincorporated part of the county and within 1/2 mile of a station that serves a commuter rail service or light rail service, or transit corridor area that both is an unincorporated part of the county and is fully encompassed by one of our municipalities. So this bill would require a transit-oriented community to meet its housing opportunity goal, and relatedly requires the department to, on or before July 31st, 2024, published a map that designates transit areas that transit-oriented communities shall use in calculating their housing opportunity goal, and on or before December 31st, 2024, publish models as guidance to assist a transit-oriented community in meeting its housing opportunity goal. So there's a lot more to the bill. Definitely don't want to read this entire thing here. But you get the idea that they're basically going to categorize certain towns, certain municipalities, certain parts of Colorado's communities as being a transit-oriented community, and then forcing this regulatory scheme on them to push this agenda. I mean, we've seen the talk about commuter rail, regional rail services, and so here you go. I'd love to hear some feedback on this one from our panel here tonight.
I sure wish there was a fiscal note to go with this. Do you see a fiscal note? I don't.
No, not yet. Unfortunately, there's no fiscal note. I was hoping to see that to get a little bit more abbreviated description of the bill, but unfortunately, there's not one yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as people kind of go around the potholes that you might run along on Wadsworth, and the government said, no, we're going to take some of the money that would go into that because Wadsworth would be a CDOT road, or, a variety of major roads through town, and it's going to be diverted. It used to be called the Highway Trust Fund, and then they turned it into tax fund, as far as I know. And this is just it. Where's the trust? And now you're going to forget the carrot. The carrot doesn't work. So here comes the big old stick.
Let's break the stick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, Wednesday, it'd be nice if fiscal note was up by now.
Yeah, definitely a bad bill. This social engineering scheme to create these transit-oriented communities, shuffle people into this high density housing along transit lines and let them these state bureaucrats manage everything. I mean, it'll be a disaster. It'll be a disaster. The central planning always fails. These lofty goals are unachievable except through the market. So,
I mean,
a bad bill. Go ahead.
I was going to say Colorado's so diverse that this is doomed to fail from the start. So, I mean, I don't understand how anybody could try to push this through, because Denver is so much different from Aurora, let alone Fort Collins or Colorado Springs or Grand Junction, Pueblo, or even go down as far as like Springfield in the southeast corner. I mean, there's so much diversity within the Colorado. Even Colorado's small towns are so different, because you've got the small towns in the prairies, and you've got the small towns in the mountains. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's interesting looking at the groups that are lobbyists supporting this. So I'll just go through Centennial State Prosperity, which I don't know who that is. Colorado Concern. It's one of the big business groups pushing the property tax increase, but they want this. Colorado Education Association, Colorado Sierra Club, Conservation Colorado, Denver Metro Chamber, Denver Public Schools, Denver Streets Partnership, and then Gary Advocacy, which goes way back to the biggest money between Prop 123 for Prop 13, millions of dollars. There's probably some more, but I'll leave it at that.
So the same old players pushing this housing scheme, these same authoritarians trying to think they can centrally manage Colorado, manage our society through their development here. So,
and the difference being liberty is choice, right? And where's the choice?
Right. No choice. No choice. You get along with the program, or they come after you, right? So this is going to be heard Wednesday, March 6th in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old State Library. Definitely a bill you want to keep an eye on. show up and testify if at all possible, but definitely part of this agenda to create this centrally planned communities across Colorado. So definitely a disaster of a bill.
By the way, I see a large chunk, and it's where CML, I'm reading through a large chunk of cities that are opposing this, just for information there. And I'm guessing CML might be on that list. I've got a video on my Colorado Engage where Dr. Cog, Denver Regional Council of Governments, talked about these bills, and they were really blunt about it. So anybody who wants to hear that firsthand of that discussion, they can find my YouTube channel, which is hard to find.
What's it called, Natalie? I'm going to look it up right now.
Colorado Engaged on YouTube, which I know you're going to get wedding videos, but you got to just scroll past those, and I don't know how to narrow it more than that.
Oh, I hear ya.
But there's a purple lightning looking thing, so you'll see that.
All right.
So we talked about let's go through Wednesday here. So that was 1313. Wednesday, also a very interesting bill of the week, House Bill 1028. That's the overdose prevention centers, a bill that keeps coming up. The bill that we see it pretty much every year, right? So they want to allow municipalities, cities, towns, city and counties to authorize the operation of an overdose prevention center within the municipality's boundaries for the purpose of saving the lives of persons at risk of preventable overdoses. Find this extremely interesting. If anybody's been following the drug legalization or decriminalization effort out in Oregon, a bill just passed in the Oregon legislature to repeal their liberalization of drug laws because they feel like it's been a disaster and attracted the wrong kind of element and created this incentivized system where people are doing hard drugs on the streets and creating an unsafe community. So, from a libertarian perspective, of course, I support the rights of individuals to do what they want. So this is a very interesting type of bill, an issue that is not going away. Colorado's been leading the states with legalizing cannabis back in 2014 or 2013, and then becoming law in 2014. And then, of course, the psychedelic ballot measure that passed last year. So very interesting to see this going through. I have a hunch that this bill will be killed because I think that it's an issue that the majority would not want to tackle at this time. But I don't know. Love to get anybody else's thoughts on this.
I agree with you absolutely with your intuition on this. I think EPS is absolutely on the outs right now, and I think this is not something that the majority of the Democrats are going to want to tackle right now. And I think it's just going to get killed pretty quickly. I doubt it's going to be too interesting of a debate.
Perfect. Any other thoughts from anybody, or we'll move on?
Yeah, I agree. There's a big migrant crisis that we're dealing with in Denver right now. I think that takes priority over this.
Yeah, I mean, the cartels coming in, they might not oppose this idea of, letting people sample their products in a safe environment, right? And then they can come back to them later. But this bill is being heard Wednesday, March 6th at the Health and Human Services Committee, 1:30 p.m., House Committee Room 112, March 6th. So interesting bill. Whether you oppose it or support it, definitely get in touch with your state legislator and committee members and let them know what you think. So interesting bill. Also on Wednesday, a very interesting bill here on the opposite side of the spectrum, the increased penalty possession of synthetic opiates, excuse me. So kind of an interesting bill. Was asked recently in perspective on this one. I mean, obviously, there's been talk in the media about a fentanyl crisis, about a lot of this stuff going on. So this bill makes it more difficult, basically, for people to get out of these charges of having fentanyl or anything on them. So looking at the fiscal note, just to simplify it here, since July 1st, 2022, a person who knowingly possesses more than 1 gram of fentanyl, carfenol, benzimazole, opiate, or an analog thereof commits a level 4 drug felony. Possession of less than 1 gram is a level 1 drug misdemeanor for the first offense and a level 4 drug felony for the second offense. Unknowingly possessing 1 to 4 grams of the above substances is a level 1 drug misdemeanor. Starting July 1st, 2024, this bill would make possessing those substances no matter the amount, and no matter if a person knowingly possessed it or not, a level 4 drug felony. So this is clamping down on the fentanyl drugs and all of that. So, from a libertarian perspective, I don't necessarily think it's a great bill. Definitely an interesting bill, especially the unknowingly possessing or not. If there's jokes in the past about every dollar bill's contaminated with some sort of drug on it. So, I could see a situation in which you have a very, very small amount, uh, trace amounts on your person. Maybe you get pulled over in a bad stop, they civil asset forfeiture your property. They find a trace amount on somewhere in your rental car or something like that of this substance, and all of a sudden you're a felon. So I don't necessarily support this type of legislation, but I'd love to get people's perspective on this. And I think it's an interesting example of this clamp down bills. We're seeing these bills to clamp down on crime, which is running rampant in Colorado. Any thoughts from anybody here on the panel?
No,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I said I'm.
Oh, um, yeah, I think kind of at this point, most people recognize the war on drugs has failed. There are some issues with drugs. I mean, I don't think anybody will say that we don't have any problems with drugs in our society, but I mean, the war on drugs has failed. I mean, the ATF uses it to, go shoot somebody's dog. So, and I say that jokingly, but in all seriousness, I mean, it causes a lot of, I mean, the war on drugs has caused a lot of issues. It's caused a lot of deaths. It's caused a lot of fatherlessness. And that's one of the things that we're dealing with in society. So my question is why aren't these people working within society and kind of, I mean, a lot of the times the people who are pro the drug war are people who say that they are support limited government. So my question is, why aren't we working within the community on a non-governmental level to help people from even getting to the point where they need these types of drugs in the first place? So that way we don't have to deal with it on a political level.
Yeah, fair point there. I mean, addressing the symptom of the problem or the problem itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the worst part about this bill that currently, if a defendant can show supporting evidence to establish that they made a reasonable mistake of fact and did not know that the substance they are found in possession of did not contain fentanyl, then they can get a level 1 drug misdemeanor, right? And you hear about this all the time, right? People are getting these pills, people are getting these other drugs. They don't know that it's fentanyl, right? That's why people are overdosing. They don't know that there's fentanyl in there. So if they can show that that's not the case, they mistakenly got fentanyl thinking it was something else. Now all of a sudden we're going to have a felony instead of just a misdemeanor. So, um, interesting bill there. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this one, but we'll move on unless there's any other comments. So this bill's being heard Wednesday, March 6th in the House Judiciary Committee, House Committee Room 107 at 1:30 p.m. So one of the interesting bills from Wednesday. So that's what we got for Wednesday, those three of the day. Moving on to Thursday. So as people know, usually it's Monday through Thursday, or when most of these committee hearings are. Of course, as we get later in the session and crunch time comes, we'll see Friday. But as of now, Thursday, some interesting bills. Let's jump into these. House Bill 1261, civil remedies to prevent human trafficking. I thought this was really interesting and deserved some attention. Representative Scott Bottoms has been a pro-liberty leader down there. Definitely somebody who has a strong stance on a lot of things and is not willing to back down. We know human trafficking is a major issue that's been brought to light recently, and it happens in Colorado. Believe it or not, it's a serious issue. So this House bill would create BRAVE, the Battling to Restore, Advocate, and Vanquish Exploitation Act of 2024. So interesting. The purpose of the BRAVE Act is to authorize qualified nonprofit organizations that work to combat human trafficking in Colorado or provide aftercare services to survivors of human trafficking to initiate civil litigation against human traffickers. These nonprofits are given legal standing in human trafficking cases in which they were involved. The Office of the Attorney General has a responsibility for purpose of notice and oversight. The Colorado Human Trafficking Council is responsible for developing victim-centered and trauma-informed training. So this bill creates a human trafficking prevention and aftercare services fund. Any thoughts on this from anybody on our panel?
I want to clarify with you that since this is in the quote unquote kill committee, would you say this is appropriately placed in the kill committee?
That's a fair point. I would think, yeah, I would probably expect it to maybe to go to judiciary, potentially. But I don't know. It could be a state issue because it's creating it's changing how their attorney general is operating with these nonprofits. So it might be in the right committee, but I do expect this bill to be killed, just like we saw Representative Bradley's bill killed 2 weeks ago to punish those who pay for children for sexual purposes. The Democrats killed that bill. I expect them to kill this one as well. But I'd be very curious to see what happens. So this bill is going to be heard this Thursday in the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee upon adjournment, LSBA, so the Legislative Services Building across from the state capitol, upon adjournment on Thursday for any interested parties. If you're concerned about human trafficking, this might be a committee hearing you might want to attend, at least to get more information and understand the bill a little bit better. I imagine that, Scott Bottoms has great intentions. Of course, I'm concerned with increasing the size and scope of government, giving them a fund to go after people. But I guess if the government's going after anybody, human trafficker seems to be some of the worst people out there. So yeah, go ahead.
I would highly encourage as many people as possible to find a way to testify for this bill, and go watch Sound of Freedom right before you testify too. Really pump yourself up to testify for this one, because this is important.
Yeah, definitely a big issue. Human trafficking probably happens more than people expect. Also, just looking at the bill text, seeing that there's no co-sponsors, I expect this bill to be killed. So, that's another way to kind of look at to kind of judge what's going to happen with this bill. There's no bipartisan, there's no Democratic co-sponsor, there's not even a Senate sponsor who's a Republican on it. So it looks like Scott Bottoms is alone in his quest to fight human traffickers here. But of course, it'll just be another example of House Democrats not holding criminals accountable. So very interesting that way. Moving on Thursday, Senate Bill 22. We've talked about this in the past, but I at least wanted to bring it up that it's going to be heard again. It's the Regulate Flavored Tobacco Products. A very bad bill. Of course, it has been amended, so I did want to bring it up for that way. So it says now the bill allows a board of county commissioners to adopt an ordinance or resolution to prohibit retail sale of cigarettes, tobacco products, or nicotine products, including prohibiting the sale of any and all flavored cigarettes, flavored tobacco products, or flavored nicotine products. So, of course, a very bad bill, a prohibition scheme. Of course, we see on one side, it's always so interesting to see the split. We're seeing safe places for people to, we're seeing legislation for people to go shoot up hard drugs. We're seeing an attack on tobacco products in the same week. It's very interesting to see these bills go through in the state house and the state senate around the same time. But a very bad bill. There's a really good article from one of the smoker-friendly VPs this week, a good editorial in the Boulder Daily Camera, I believe, talking about how this bill will lead to incentivize black market activity. The more the state clamps down and outlaws tobacco products, you're just going to create an incentivized system in which the smuggling and illegal sale of tobacco products is now more worthwhile than it was before, because these products are either banned in those communities or are outrageously priced by government regulation. So, the black market, bring it on for flavored tobacco products here in Colorado, I guess. Any other thoughts on this bill?
I got a question. You brought up black market sales. I'm kind of curious, can Costco or Sam's Club sell, or do they sell tobacco products?
They used to sell tobacco and no longer do.
They no longer do. Okay. Well, I guess it won't. I was gonna say they would because I don't personally smoke or anything like that, so it's nothing I really know a ton about. But anyway, the point still kind of stands. People are going to start going up to Wyoming to do a lot more business, particularly for tobacco. I mean, people are going to want to go up there, get their Zen. They're going to want to get their vape products. And they're not going to be in Colorado. All they're really doing is driving business away from Colorado.
Well, and I can say this firsthand, having seen it. This and Proposition EE, which drove up the prices, created the $7.50 minimum price for cigarettes, has now taken it to where it is more and more of a threat and a occurrence where thieves are breaking in, ramming their car into a tobacco store and robbing it. And within just a few shelves, it will be thousands of dollars because of what government's interference and adult behavior mechanism has driven people to. So where's that black market come from? It comes from the little mom and pop store or the retailer like Smoker Friendly that get, a car rammed into their place. And there's plenty of videos out there. And I know in Lakewood one was just done. And so I was actually, it's on my list to do is a Cora, which hopefully I can do that and I won't be a vexatious requester. But I would like to know how many tobacco stores and vape shops have been broken into with a burglary in 3 large jurisdictions. Because this problem's getting worse. So, but if they ban it in all the counties, people will drive to Wyoming, even though it's supposed to be against the law to do it. People will find a way.
Absolutely.
How much harm is created in the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very bad bill. You can see the history here. It did pass the Senate with the amendments. And we'll move on now to the House. So this is the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee, House Committee Room 112 on Thursday, March 7th, 1:30 p.m. Very bad bill attacking our fundamental rights. Anti-tobacco, of course, absolutely wild to see in a state that has been leading the charge for legal cannabis, legal psychedelics. Tobacco is something they're working to ban. I mean, absolutely and utterly crazy. There was some talk. I'm glad you mentioned EE, Natalie. So Proposition EE passed, I think it was in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, to tax tobacco products for funding Polis's universal preschool program. This bill, of course, is expected, if they start banning tobacco, well, their money's going to dry up for their daycare program. So that's another aspect to it. We'll see another crisis there where they won't have money to fulfill their obligations, just like we're seeing with Proposition 8FF from last year. So it's just a self-creating problem that these government entities create.
Well, and it's not been said before plenty of times, but for those who don't smoke and it's just tax on them. Well, when you depend on them and then they've got to build this structure of government that will never, ever change, go away, but it just get bigger, then that shifts over to the person who's not the smoker and they're paying for it anyway. So,
and a lot of people who smoke nicotine are lower income, so it turns into a poor tax.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's an assault on the working class of Colorado for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Thursday, Senate Bill 22. We got a few more bills we want to talk about here. We're running out of time. We've talked about the just cause eviction requirements, House Bill 1098. This is coming back to committee now after amendment. So just wanted to bring this up to people's, awareness. This is a bill, of course, to make it more difficult for evictions to occur. So this is an assault on the rights of property owners, landlords, rental property companies, which will ultimately decrease the supply of rental properties and create new regulatory schemes when only the big corporate entities feel comfortable or being able to afford to rent properties, right? And mom and pop rentals are going to be going by the wayside with legislation like this. So this is going to be heard Thursday, March 7th, upon adjournment, Senate Committee Room 352. It did pass the House with amendments, so now it's into the Senate. So very bad bill. It'd be nice to see the Senate kill this bill. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But it's only going to happen if individuals reach out to their state senators and tell them what a bad bill this is. House Bill 1298. A good bill here. Love to see this move forward. Have no expectation that it's going to pass. This is the labor union for school employees due restriction. So we've heard labor unions, the Colorado CEA, Colorado Education Association, other teachers unions are some of the worst offenders out there in terms of lobbying for the growth of government, increased taxes, and restrictions on the public's ability to know what's going on in schools, of course. So this bill would be a direct attack on labor unions in schools. The bill would prohibit a labor union that is composed of school employees from directly using union member dues to promote the election or re-election of a public officer or to promote a local or state ballot measure to which the union member has expressed opposition. So definitely a way to try and stymie school education labor unions from being politically powerful. This bill, I'm sure, is going to fail, but nonetheless, a good attempt from Senator Baisley and Representative Bradley to try and rein in the power of these school teachers unions. Any thoughts on this from anybody?
Anyone following the stuff that's going on in Texas with the school administration that are electioneering for the anti-school choice candidates? This seems like it's under that directly.
I haven't heard about that. Interesting. So it's going on in Texas.
There's been this is like Corey DeAngelis's work. He's been having people blow the whistle on school administrations that are sending out emails, using their school email account to the employees, being like, "Hey, vote for this person," which is expressly against Texas law to electioneer using state / school board funded resources.
I appreciate that context, Nick. Yeah, definitely an issue that's been going on for a long time and definitely going on around the country. This is a very good bill, in my opinion, from a political perspective here to try and stymie the influence and power of these teachers unions who seem to always be authoritarian. So Thursday, March 7th in the Education Committee at 1:30 p.m., House Committee Room 107. Please testify in person. Reach out to the committee members, reach out to your elected representative if you'd like. But please, speak out and stand up for good bills every time we can, right? It's always nice to be able to support a good bill and not always be trying to fight against the bad ones. Perfect. Any other thoughts? Perfect. All right, so we'll move on here to last couple of bills. I thought this one was interesting. House Bill 1246. Curious to see it from a libertarian perspective, but nonetheless, Ken DeGraff is very passionate. He's a state representative. DeGraff is very passionate about environmental, global warming types of issues. Really going after the narrative here and trying to have some influence over our power grid. So, very interesting bill. House Bill 1246, the Electric Grid Resilience Temporary Carbon Dioxide Regulation, concerning emissions emanating from power sources and in connection therewith addressing electric generation and distribution resilience and suspending the regulation of carbon dioxide as an air pollutant. So this bill would do a lot. What I really like is this here. The bill prohibits the classification of carbon dioxide as an air pollutant and establishes, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, the state statute, executive agency rules, and any regulations of political subdivisions of the state must not include the regulation of carbon dioxide emissions as a pollutant. Any portion of an executive agency rule that treats carbon dioxide emissions as a pollutant is void. So definitely one of the key parts of the bill there. I'm sure this bill is doomed to failure, but nonetheless, going after this narrative, this green agenda to go after carbon dioxide, I think is a step in the right direction from Representative DeGraff here. So, any other thoughts on this one?
I like that it's trying to. He's not. He knows that if. To me, it seems like he's trying to play a political game in order to help us. Like he knows he couldn't just send a bill in that would completely kill all these regulations. But if he can kind of reduce some of these restrictions, it kind of ease some of the regulations that they're trying to enforce on us might be a better option. I mean, yeah, it just seems like a political game. I think it's gonna die, but I I hope it passes.
Yeah, I
I'd
really
rather. Hmm?
go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say not necessarily that I agree with having these regulations in the first place, but I hope from a pragmatic standpoint it passes is what I mean. Just want to clarify.
Yeah. Bennett says, but I'm a source of carbon dioxide, which is true. You're the carbon they want to reduce, right? They want
At
to
the end of the day.
reduce it. I thought this was interesting too about the electricity grid resilience. So developing a contingency plan to generate electricity following a geomagnetic storm. So that's kind of interesting to look at it that way, as well as, changing how they calculate emissions. So a good attempt from Representative DeGraff. He's a great resource if anybody wants to talk about environmental science, talk about the global climate agenda. Definitely a very passionate and informed individual when it comes to that subject. So definitely somebody to talk to, and very interesting bill he's pushed forward here. So that bill will be heard Thursday. Let's see where it's going to be heard Thursday in the Energy and Environment Committee at 1:30 p.m. LSB, so Legislative Service Building A on Thursday, March 7th. Perfect. So last bill of the week that I have here. Happy to discuss any others if anybody's got any, but air quality permitting. So this is the flip side of what Representative DeGraff is trying to do. This basically would clarify that a request for a general permit registration does not constitute having a valid construction permit, because if you want a valid construction permit, you will have to either get permission from the Department of Public Health and Environment or the Air Quality Control Commission that they evaluate your permit application if you have an emitting source of oil and gas. So basically, this is another attack on the energy industry and anybody who's trying to produce electricity or produce, a carbon of any forms. This is going to make it a lot more difficult, of course, just part of this agenda to phase out the oil and gas industry here in Colorado and go after anything that creates emissions, which could be, as Bennett pointed out, could be an individual, could be anything, could be any type of business, if you expand the scope wide enough. So very, very bad bill. For getting a permit for construction air quality would have to be a part of it. So of course, everything can pollute the air if you look at it from a certain perspective, right? You're kicking up dust, you're running construction equipment, uh, you're driving trucks to bring construction supplies. I mean, that hurts the air quality too. So another example of using this green agenda to try and infringe on our rights and give more control to the government. So very, very bad bill. Yeah, any thoughts on this before we move on? So that's what we got for some of the interesting bills of the week. I'd like to do a little bit of follow up here on some of the bills that we've talked about in previous weeks. So, of course, the bill to regulate delivery driver network companies, your Uber and Lyft, still does not have a committee hearing yet. This is 1129. That we talked about the just cause required for eviction and residential tenant in 1098 being heard this Thursday. The total gun ban, 1292, prohibits certain weapons. Committee hearing not yet scheduled. Another anti-energy bill. This is the modification to energy and carbon management processes where they basically shut down oil and gas wells in Colorado, Senate Bill 159. That'll be heard on March 14th. The Senate Transportation Network Company Transparency Bill. I don't believe there's another committee hearing scheduled yet, but this is the other regulation bill for rideshare companies. This is the one that's the more quote unquote reasonable one and more likely to pass, Senate Bill 75. The raw milk bill, regulatory scheme for raw milk, where raw milk producers would have to register with the government, has not seen another committee scheduled yet. The concealed carry permits and training, the anti-concealed carry bill, 1174. Of course, being heard Monday, March 4th, 1:30 p.m. The modifications to Colorado Open Records Act, we talked about that. House Bill 1296, Monday of March 4th at 1:30 p.m. They're prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive spaces. Senate Bill 131. This is the Victim Disarmament Bill, giving criminals free reign in specific areas across Colorado. Senate Bill 131, March 13th, will be heard then. We'll get Ian back for that one. The one, Senate Bill 65, to make it a criminal penalty for using your cell phone while driving. No committee hearing yet scheduled for next committee hearing. It's already passed one committee. The non-legal name changes bill. This was one of the most controversial bills of the legislature last week, and did pass the House, is moving on to the Senate, but has not yet got to committee hearings scheduled in the Senate. We'll see how that goes there. The overdose prevention centers we talked about, March 6th. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation Authority to investigate firearms crime. They're giving $1.7 million to the CBI to go after gun dealers, gun stores, FFLs. No committee hearing. Next committee hearing is not yet scheduled. It's already passed one. The flavored tobacco products, Senate Bill 22, March 7th. Of course, we talked about that. Stephanie Luck's bill to publish bill drafts online before session 1022. There's not a next committee hearing is not yet scheduled. The Airbnb tax bill, Senate Bill 33, did get rescheduled. It had a date and then it's been rescheduled and there's not yet scheduled again. So I'm sure they're retweaking that bill. Bill to create a new regulation system for people who are tow truck companies. It does ignore the line there. It does have a committee hearing on March 14th. It just got assigned. And then thankfully two of the bills that died, or one bill that died that was bad, was 1163, the pet animal registration system, the ridiculous bill, and a good bill that died, 1065. So those were the bills we've been tracking so far. Any other comments? We'll open the floor up if anybody wants to talk, anybody wants to go over anything else. We're at the end of our slideshow here.
Did we go over the 24-1288? That's up for hearing tomorrow. It's a EITC, earned income tax credit. Doesn't necessarily mean it's earned.
What was the bill number? I'm sorry.
24-1288. And what that is basically doing is asking the IRS if it's okay to get the Colorado Department of Revenue would get from the IRS, if they approve this, a list of names of taxpayers who did not take advantage of the earned income tax credit for year 2022. Then the state would be required, in a sense, to promote and hunt the people down to get them to take their earned income tax credit. And with the expansion we've seen of the EITC, this one caught my attention. So I'll just bring that to people's mind. There's really not a fiscal note. I mean, it's like $100,000, but that's because it's just the part of the process where getting approval from IRS to get a hold of the list, Colorado Department of Revenue, then plots out a pilot program. It's a pilot program, all right? And then it moves from there. So when it would move from there, then that's when there would be this larger fiscal impact. And why is the EITC important? Because the Dems have tried repeatedly to get rid of Tabor and are now using the EITC to take chunk after chunk after chunk out of the Tabor refunds. This now is making it even like a retroactive thing in a sense of getting the list and then pushing it from there. So I think it's noteworthy, and it's right at the same time as the Cora bill. So I don't know if I'm going to get to both or not, but I'll be going to the Cora first. So I wanted to bring that one up for people's list.
Yeah, definitely a bad bill. Of course, a wealth redistribution scheme, taking money from tax producers, giving it to tax consumers, and now creating a pilot program for the state to target individuals to give them more, to better redistribute our tax money I mean, absolutely and utterly ridiculous to expand the scope of the handouts that are going to people across Colorado. So this is definitely a bad bill. It's House Bill 1288, to be heard on Monday at the Finance Committee, March 4th, 1:30 p.m., House Committee Room 112. So
Yeah.
definitely a bad bill. Thanks for mentioning that one, Natalie.
Yeah, and it is a refundable credit, so that doesn't mean you pay in to get it. So if you have $200 worth of, you won a bet and you got $200, that doesn't mean you pay into the income tax system. The way this is structured, you will get a check from the government, which is then somebody else's income tax they paid in and are no longer getting it on their refund. So, or TABOR refund, rebate, whatever. So that's why it's important, and there's 2 or 3 bills tied with the EITC, and that was one of the ones from the special session that got passed, and nothing was going to stop it. So here now it's just accelerating more and more of that pie. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, good catch. Good. Thank you for pointing that out. Anything else to talk about for what's on the docket this week from anybody or any general conversation?
Property Tax Commission is closing up. That's this Friday again, because now they're on the accelerated schedule. The easiest way, since we're out of time, I did post videos on my YouTube channel, Colorado Engaged. The commission eventually, after getting a lot of presentations, broke out into 3 groups, sub work groups. One of them was taxpayer relief. That's the one I focused on. Then they had an assessment mini group and a local control mini group. Then all those groups come back together as a committee and said what their final recommendations are. I posted that video, 20 minutes or whatever, however long it is. And if you want to not have to suffer through the many hours that I did, that will then get you right to what their recommendations are. On that same day, this last Friday, 2 days ago, they also heard from Michael Fields with Advanced Colorado and Josh Penry representing Colorado Concern about the ballot measures that are either on the ballot, like Michael's already going to be on the ballot, or Colorado Concern, which is going through title board and would have to go through the signatures, but they got so much money that won't be a problem for them. Basically telling the Commission on Property Taxes, if you don't do something, we're going to hit the streets. So this is all coming to a head right now, and that's again the videos on my channel.
Perfect. No, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, definitely a big issue, a big deal. We're going to see this come November on our statewide ballots. And of course, it'll be interesting to see what this committee comes up with. But yeah, definitely, communicate with the committee, reach out to them and let them know that, lowering taxes is the simple solution. Perfect. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
Well, appreciate everybody for joining this week. It was a lot of fun. Really excited for the guests that we had. Really appreciate Mayor of Monument coming on and his Mayor Pro Tem to discuss that bill. And of course, everybody else who joined. So thank you very much, everybody. We will reconvene next week. We'll see you at 7:30 every Sunday through the end of the legislative session here. So appreciate it and take care. Best wishes.
Good night, everyone.
Nate, thank you everybody for showing up.